Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're acting as biological detectives. We're investigating the ultimate culprits behind human ailments. Think about it. We're going to explore the literal architecture of disease. We're talking everything from those microscopic invaders trying to breach our defenses, all the way down to tiny, hidden flaws in our very own genetic blueprints. Drawing on core principles from the CCSC biology syllabus, we're going to break down exactly how these diseases operate, how they spread, and most importantly, how we can fight back.
Okay, let's dive right into our roadmap for this explainer. First up, we'll map out the 4 disease categories. Then we'll zero in on the deadly mosquito vector. After that, we'll look at treatment, immunity, and control. And finally, we'll wrap up with the true cost of disease.
All right, Section 1, the 4 disease categories, mapping the biological threats. To really get a grip on disease, I want you to picture the human body as a highly fortified castle. It's this complex, beautiful structure, right? But it is constantly under threat. Biologists break these threats down into 4 distinct groups. First off, we have pathogenic diseases. These are your classic external invaders, viruses, bacteria, and parasites actively trying to storm the castle gates. Next, we have deficiency diseases. Now, this isn't an attack, it's more like a resource shortfall. Think of it as the castle running out of supplies, caused by dietary shortages, like a lack of vital vitamins or iron. Then, there are hereditary diseases. These happen when the threat is inherited, caused by faulty genes passed down from parents. It's essentially an internal blueprint flaw. And finally, the 4th group, physiological diseases. This is an internal system failure, where the body's organs or systems just begin to malfunction over time.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, for those pathogenic invaders, we're talking about massive threats like malaria, dengue, yellow fever, and measles. But if a person isn't getting enough iron in their diet, that resource shortfall leads directly to a deficiency disease like anemia. What about those internal blueprint flaws? Hereditary conditions include things like sickle cell anemia and hemophilia. And for physiological system failures, the most common examples you'll see are diabetes and hypertension. Pinning down exactly which category an ailment falls into, that is absolutely crucial. It's the very first step in knowing how to defeat it. Moving right along to Section 2, the deadly mosquito vector, anatomy of an outbreak.
We're going to shift our focus now to those external invaders, the pathogens. See, pathogens rarely travel alone. They rely on delivery systems, and the most notorious delivery system on the planet, the mosquito. But understanding the mosquito's life cycle isn't just some textbook biology lesson. It's literally about mapping out tactical vulnerabilities for pest control. It goes through 4 distinct stages. It all starts as an egg, laid directly in stagnant pools of water. Those eggs hatch into a larva, which hangs out in that stagnant water, totally vulnerable to aquatic predators. Next up is the pupa stage. It stays in the water, but here's the kicker. It uniquely requires access to surface air to survive. Finally, it emerges as an adult. This is the airborne vector stage, the one that feeds on blood, usually around dusk, and actively transmits pathogens from host to host.
Once it's an adult, the mosquito is essentially the perfect biological syringe. It's wild to think about, but this makes it the deadliest animal on Earth. It acts as both a host and a transport mechanism. For instance, it carries parasites like Plasmodium. That's the pathogen responsible for malaria. It also transmits serious viruses like dengue and yellow fever. And certain species, like the Aedes aegypti, they are particularly dangerous because they've actually evolved to thrive right alongside us in human-populated areas. When they bite, they totally bypass our skin, which is our primary physical defense, and inject the pathogen directly into the bloodstream.
Now, it's fascinating to see how the biology of the mosquito directly translates into hard epidemiological data. When you map out the reported cases of a mosquito-related disease over a couple of decades, you see sheer volumes of cases right alongside the proportion that became severely life-threatening. The relationship is clear. When vector populations boom, often because of environmental factors like a bunch of heavy rainfall creating more stagnant water for those eggs, we see massive real-world illness spikes across the population. It's a really stark reminder that a microscopic pathogen carried by a tiny little insect can create huge waves of human suffering.
Okay, Section 3, treatment, immunity, and control, fighting back.
So, the fortress is under attack, and the vectors are swarming. How do we fight back? This is the solutions phase of our explainer. Breaking this cycle requires our body's internal defenses working alongside human intervention. Our primary internal weapon is immunity, but that actually comes in 2 distinct forms. First, natural immunity. This is developed organically. Your body gets exposed to a pathogen out in the wild, it fights it off, and your own immune memory cells essentially take notes, remembering exactly how to defeat it next time. Artificial immunity, on the other hand, is acquired through medical intervention.
This is where we outsmart the bug. By using vaccines or anti-serum injections, like getting a shot after stepping on a rusty nail to prevent tetanus, we actively force our body to build up those defenses without having to actually suffer through the full natural disease.
But relying solely on our immune system, that's a pretty dangerous game. We absolutely need environmental control too, and that means targeting the mosquito at every single stage of its life cycle. Remember those tactical vulnerabilities we just talked about? Well, here is exactly how we exploit them. To get rid of the eggs, we simply drain stagnant pools of water, instantly wiping out their breeding sites. For the larvae, we can use biological controls, like tossing small fish into ponds that will happily snack on that aquatic stage. For the pupa, remember how they need surface air to breathe? A thin layer of oil poured on the water's surface literally suffocates them. And for the adults, we bring in the big guns, insecticides and chemical repellents, specifically targeting them when they're most active at dusk.
Of course, nature always fights back, right? A huge complication in vector control is chemical resistance. If we repeatedly spray an area with an insecticide, like DDT, the handful of mosquitoes that just happen to possess a natural genetic resistance are going to survive. They then reproduce, passing that specific resistance right along to their offspring. Over time, you end up breeding a superpopulation of mosquitoes that completely shrug off the chemicals that used to kill them. It is literally a constant, ongoing evolutionary arms race. We can never rely on just one method of control. We have to constantly innovate.
Now, there's a crucial point we can't miss here. While pathogenic diseases force us to manage our external environment in those pesky vectors, physiological diseases demand a totally different approach. You can't just spray an insecticide to cure diabetes or hypertension, right? These internal system failures require strict management of our own internal environment. We're talking rigorous management of diet, a real commitment to active exercise, and understanding our own biology, like how hormones such as insulin and glucagon regulate our blood sugar. Both pathogenic and physiological diseases take serious discipline to manage. They're just applied in completely different directions.
And that brings us to Section 4, the true cost of disease, a societal burden.
As we wrap things up, we need to zoom way out. We've talked about the individual human body, we've talked about the local puddles where mosquitoes breed, but what happens to a whole society when a disease really takes hold? The implications are absolutely massive. On a social level, diseases cause severe loss of human life and just completely disrupt families. When an outbreak hits, infected folks often face forced isolation, which fractures communities and support networks. Economically, a sick population means a massive loss of productivity, and right when fewer people can work, there's an exponentially increased demand on human and medical services, draining public funds. Plus, this isn't just a human issue. Pathogens wreck agriculture too, causing collateral damage through devastating livestock and crop diseases. This right here is exactly why biology isn't just a subject for doctors. It matters to economists, to politicians, and honestly, to every single one of us.
Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Think back to our fortress from the beginning. If biological pathogens and genetic flaws are the spark, and vectors, like the mosquito, are the wind carrying that spark, how resilient is your community's fortress against the resulting fire? Because as we've seen today, keeping that fortress secure doesn't just rely on hospitals and medicine. It relies on the personal choices we all make, like simply emptying a bucket of stagnant water in the backyard, and the public health policies we support. It's all connected. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your defenses strong.